Delhi, the nation's cosmopolitan capital, where dreams are realized and broken in equal measure. Many migrants struggle just to survive. I don't know where I stand. Delhi has brought to life many of my dreams, but I also catch myself looking into the hollows within. The hollows are borrowed from other migrants' loneliness and isolation in a big city. And I know I'm not imagining it. As I meet some young and old middle-class professionals who have settled down in Delhi, I realize that they are at a loss, as the city has yet to accept them. Vipin Kumar, a software professional from Bihar's Bhagalpur, has been away from his hometown for 8 years, out of which he has spent the last 3 years in Delhi. But he doesn't like being here and wants to go back.
20 घंटे की जर्नी तय करके अपने पेरेंट्स, भाई बहन, सारे रिलेटिव्स को छोड़ के यहाँ आने का यही है कि एक बेहतर ज़िंदगी की तलाश में। अगर वो हमें यहाँ नहीं मिल पाता है तो फिर हमें लगता है कि चलो यहाँ भी एक निराशा हाथ लगी है।
Sharing an apartment with 5 other men makes him feel at home. But he craves for an education and employment system that wouldn't pull him out of home just for a job. Delhi will always be just a workplace, never home to him, says Vipin.
ये कहना मैं कह दूं कि दिल्ली मेरे लिए घर है तो ये मुश्किल बात है। यहाँ तो बस अभी भी यही लगता है कि मैं बस जॉब करने ही आया हूँ।
Vipin feels that the city judges, suspects and condemns people fast, and that it has no place for innocence. He hasn't remained unaffected by the calculations that are part of Delhi's air. If earlier it was spontaneity that guided him, now it's calculation that does so. Even in choosing to apply for leave when it's time to attend important festivals back home.
Continuous 10 days का वैकेशन है, ये पॉसिबल नहीं होता कॉर्पोरेट वर्ल्ड के लिए कि आपको लीव मिल सके। और फिर हमें डिसाइड करना होता है, फिर घर से बात करनी होती है कि देखो यार हम इस बार नहीं आ सकते, इस बार दिवाली में, नेक्स्ट ईयर छठ में।
But there are far bigger issues to tackle, especially at the emotional level. The distance from a lifetime of family sharing and caring has left both him and his folks wounded internally.
डिफ़िकल्ट सिचुएशन है हम जैसे बैचलर के लिए कि जो बिहार से माइग्रेट कर गए, उनके पेरेंट्स हैं, अब आने वाले टाइम में उनके पेरेंट्स रिटायर होंगे। अब भाई उनको क्वेश्चन है कि वो अकेले भी नहीं रहना चाहते। अगर हम उनको यहाँ लेके आते हैं तो उनके लिए डिफ़िकल्टी होती है कि इस सोसाइटी के साथ उनको एडजस्ट होने में बहुत डिफ़िकल्टी है।
He also gets upset at the local aggression against migrants, but is determined to overcome it with dedication to his work. They can grudge him his talent, they can't rob him of it.
मेरा ड्रीम है कि 200 आम के बगीचे हो जाएं और वहाँ मैं मतलब कभी भी अगर दिल्ली से भी जाऊँ तो ये 2 फ्लैट के रूम से निकल करके मैं उस बड़े से बाग में घूमूँ और मेरे को 2 दिन में बहुत ज़्यादा ही सुकून मिलेगा।
Vipin also understands that not every Bihari has the means to migrate to these lands of opportunity. So he dreams of doing something for the have-not. Opening a school in his village, for instance.
बेसिकली मेरा जो प्राइमरी एजुकेशन हुआ है गांव के एरिया में, तो मैं देखा हूँ कि मेरे हाफ ऑफ द फ्रेंड्स मतलब आफ्टर 10th दे आर नॉट एबल टू कंटिन्यू देयर एजुकेशन। तो मैं फील करता हूँ अगर मैं ऐसा कुछ करूँ और कुछ एजुकेशन सेक्टर उस तरह के एरिया में इस्टेब्लिश करूँ जहाँ की कॉस्ट ऑफ एजुकेशन बहुत लो हो तो मैं बहुत अच्छा कर पाऊँ।
Sociologist Amita Baviskar has a finger on the pulse of migrant psychology. She also echoes Vipin's views as she talks about the lopsided development models in India that almost black out many regions of the country.
People in Delhi have always been slightly wary of people who come from outside. So whoever has come from outside has tended to find their own community, and when they come in large numbers, then that community is something which can be quite sustaining. So when the Punjabis came to Delhi, one, they came in large numbers. Second, they were rapidly able to make up a whole new life for themselves and became very rich as well as powerful in the city's economy. taking over from what was earlier primarily a Muslim and Banya economic class. And so you find that Punjabis, even though they came from outside, rapidly made Delhi their city. The same isn't true of people who migrated in smaller numbers.
The outsider syndrome is what bothers Mona Lisa Athar, a Manipuri journalist, the most. Unlike the Bihari migrants, who at least merge into Delhi's population because of their similar color and features, Mona Lisa sticks out. She has been in Delhi for 18 long years, but is made to feel like an outsider simply because of her different looks.
I consider myself a Delhiite in some ways, you know, like fighting with an auto wala, stuff like that. But not really, no. If I had the chance, I'd rather be at home in Manipur. So, you live here, but you really don't feel home. You always feel that distinction, you know, that you're an outsider. It's a lot to do, like I said, with my looks, you know, with my eyes, actually. Most people have this idea that, it's changing now, of course, but people have this idea that women from Northeast are cheap, or, you know, they're loose, all they do is party.
She was also driven to Delhi by the lack of opportunities back in her state. But the city has just not accepted her, she says. Even her extended family of niece, brothers and sisters being in the city has not helped her in getting a sense of belonging.
You walk in the market, you hear somebody call you a bloody chinky. It's like, now I'm very used to it, so I fight back, you know. I fight back also because the next person who comes up should not face, like, the man who is teasing me should hesitate before he teases somebody else next time. So I fight back.
The rejection is not limited to the auto drivers or rickshawalas. Even the educated class has a cultural bias against her.
I lived in GK for a long time. The landlord's son once asked us out, you know, they'd called us for dinner, they asked us, he had his friends around, and then they said, oh, we're going out after this, do you want to come with us? So we had classes and everything, we were still in college, so I said, no, thank you. It was good because later on I heard a friend saying, acha hua nahi aaya, ye log chinky hai yaar, kya sochega, you know, log kya sochega kind of thing, you know, like if they're seen with us. So it's not something that just people on the streets or uneducated people feel that way, it's not like that.
She too complains of the absence of that essential and binding humanity in Delhi. It's difficult to make friends here, says Mona Lisa.
I would talk to, like, you know, the neighbor's driver or the mali wala, but it's mistaken for something else here, you know. But back home, for somebody who just comes up, it's just innocence.
Chandrasekhar, a Tamil journalist who has spent a lifetime in Delhi, feels the same. After a quarter century in the national capital, Chandrasekhar is waiting for the day he would retire and go back to Chennai. He is the bureau chief of the Tamil daily Dinamalar. And his office looks like a miniature Tamil Nadu, right from the stacks of newspapers to the calendars and the television channel he watches. It's a reality he has created because it comforts him. Speaking Hindi is still a challenge for him. And looking back, he knows that there were many factors that triggered his sense of mental alienation.
We only pay lip service to plural society, unity and diversity. We don't really make efforts, you know. You think, you know, the Hindi heartland, that is India. Others, this is the mental block of the powers that Hindi heartland is India.
As the national capital, Delhi should have been able to accommodate regional aspirations. But something is seriously wrong somewhere for journalists and engineers alike to feel alien here.
There are two models of how immigrants assimilate to a new place. One is the melting pot model, the idea that you come in with your own culture, but when you're in that new context, your culture undergoes a change. And everybody's culture then becomes shaped in a new, you know, whatever the melting pot produces, which is some sort of a new dish altogether, a sort of a khichdi culture. The other model is that of the salad bowl, that you have lots of different ingredients The ingredients are put together and they make up a tasty salad, but the ingredients don't lose their identities.
The disconnect between him and his son, who is born and brought up in Delhi, he feels is only a reflection of that between him and Delhi.
Had I been in Madras or Chennai and my son had studied there, and we could have been a happy family, you know. That's not going to happen. And this is again the problem of a migrant. The next generation doesn't want to follow the father or mother.
Sometimes he feels like a failure because he has not been able to get absorbed into Delhi despite trying hard. In fact, he is philosophical about it and says such failures cripple the human spirit. Talking to him makes me reflect on how cultural familiarity alone can be a bridge, and its absence such a hindrance in human bonding. Chandrasekhar is now waiting for his retirement.
I'm waiting for the day. I've been telling my wife, there are 2 trains which leave for Madras. One is the Grand Trunk and the next is Tamil Nadu. GT leaves at 6 o'clock and Tamil Nadu leaves at 10 o'clock. I said, we will better leave by GT.
Vipin, Mona Lisa, Chandrasekhar. All of them yearn to go back home. And to think they are all Indians, very much part of the mainstream in the national capital. My reflections on the problems of migrants melt away as I meet Mayank Costume Sufi. A young photographer who did not wait for the city to accept him. With sheer openness of thought, Mayank carved out a place for himself in Delhi. That he comes from the nearby Nainital made it even easier.
Unfortunately, nowadays it's only in big cities that people can afford to have decent jobs, you know. For many people, there's no future in small towns and villages, unfortunately. And that's how people come in, and people from different backgrounds, you know. They're rickshawalas, they're IT workers, they're journalists. And if you really sit down with them, they all have different cities inside their lives.
In the middle of these practical reasons, he's still aware of why Delhi has almost a magnetic appeal for him.
Big cities are very anonymous, so that also gives you the comfort of doing your own things.
He feels that every big city is a sum total of many small cities and hubs. The individual almost gets erased in the larger picture. As a passionate photographer, Mayank has captured thousands of people and places, enough to fill 3 books on Delhi. In fact, he's so involved with the city that he has no time to engage with himself. And in his view, it's not as lonely for migrants as some of them make it out to be.
It's very accepting. It's one of the most fantastic cities in India. Like if you go to Bombay, it's a cosmopolitan city in so many ways, but there's so many issues like, you know, vegetarians, non-vegetarians, Jains, Hindus, Muslims. In Delhi, the last time we had something really disturbing was the 1984 riots against Sikhs. But otherwise, it's like, you know, at least you don't hound after people because you are from Bihar or you are from Uttaranchal or you don't speak Hindi or you speak Hindi. So in that way, I do not think it's intolerant.
Migration is not really, it's not really a desirable trend, but I think it's a trend that's here to stay. And as long as these regional inequalities continue to exist, there will always be a strong tendency towards migration.
What if he's given an opportunity to go back? Mayank's answer is a big no.
The charm of the big city is that it has always something more than just one thing or two things. So if I'm fed up of Nizamuddin Basti, I can always go to GK1. You know, that's not possible in Nainital. There's only that lake. It's beautiful, but for how long can I look at that lake?
If you see Delhi with Mayank's eyes, it is a great melting pot of diverse identities. Besides, it's not the rooted but the moving population that defines the city. The catch is not to get trapped in mental constructs about ourselves and others, and to disregard the outsider syndrome, because all of us are outsiders in one way or another. The challenge for the policymakers is to make migration a choice rather than a necessity.